Hi everyone, welcome back to another Technique Coding programming tutorial. This is part 3 in our UIKit coordinator patterns of the more in-depth advanced look at the coordinators. So in the previous video we went over finishing up a little bit more of the application coordinator, but primarily what we did was we created this authentication flow minus the confirm email screen. In this video, we will be going over how to create the main flow. Now, we won't be doing anything in the locations or the locations flow. We will be adding a little bit of the account flow, just a logout button, so we can complete the full auth flow to main flow back to auth flow cycle. We're going to close that today. And then in the final video, what we'll do is we will be creating this confirm email screen with the locations, and we'll be setting up the final navigation shared logic. So let's get right into it. So what we did in the last video, just to reiterate as far as the simulator goes, is we finished up the basic authentication flow. So you can come in here, hit register, enter the registration form. When you hit register, we get this nice little pop-up, and then it takes us back to the login screen. Once we're on the login screen, we can hit submit, and it brings us to what will be the home screen with the tabs at the bottom. The finished value for the tabs will look something like this. We can go back and forth between the locations and this more screen. Cool. So the first thing we'll need to do is we'll need to start making out that home screen. So let's come into this test area right here, this test view. Click on create new group, say home. And a lot of what you'll notice is all of these views, it's just repetitive. It's just create the view model, add to the navigation, create the view model, add to the navigation. So I'm going to say add a new file from template, SwiftUI view, home view, and then we'll give ourselves a little bit more real estate here. So the home view itself will just be a piece of text. That's it. We're not going to anything crazy here. That's not really the point. The point is we need a screen to populate the home area for this tab right here. And then what we'll do is we'll create these tabs at the bottom. So this one just includes a V stack with a piece of text, homepage. Now, when it comes to UIKit navigation and the navigation bar, this can be a little tricky. I might make a short video here in the future to talk about this, but basically, SwiftUI tries to hijack this. So we actually have to turn this off within SwiftUI. If you add this from both UIKit and SwiftUI, you're going to see two of these home titles on top of each other. To prevent that, what we need to do is somewhere in this home view, we have to say navigation bar back button hidden. And this is going to hide the one in SwiftUI. We are going to edit and manage this from UIKit. This is true no matter what happened, no matter the situation, if your navigation logic is in UIKit. Now, you can, with this, still, for instance, have your auth flow mainly in UIKit, and as a sub-coordinator, you could technically have another SwiftUI coordinator underneath that. That's beyond the scope of this tutorial, though. Just keep in mind that if your navigation is in UIKit, you are going to want to hide the navigation bar and manage this from the UIKit side. Okay, so from that point on, we can just build this real quick just to make sure everything's good to go. And then we can check the previews window. Okay, so the home view is done. Now, in order for us to actually show these tabs at the bottom, what we're going to do is we're going to create skeleton coordinators for the moment, just placeholder coordinators that we will use in the future to actually populate these views. For right now, we just have the home page, but here we're going to end up having an account button within the More screen after we're all said and done. The locations will be set up in the next video. So to do this, we need to add a couple more flows to our coordinators. So we're going to say new file from template, Swift file. We're going to say MainCoordinator. This is the root level coordinator right here. This is going to be the main flow, which is going to contain all of our tabs. So we're going to have a main flow and then a home flow underneath that, locations, more, so on and so forth. So MainCoordinator is going to look like this. And I'll type this out and we'll come back and I'll explain what's going on here in a minute. Give us a little bit more room here. Okay, so some of these things we're clearly not going to have yet, and we'll have to make this. So the gist of what's going on here is we have a MainCoordinator delegate. Just like in the previous video, we're heavily relying on the delegate pattern in this. The delegate of the MainCoordinator will be the root level application coordinator. So once the user logs out, this coordinator will call up to the delegate and say that the on main coordination complete. And then what's going to happen is it's going to delegate back up to the application coordinator. And then since the user is not logged in, it will show the auth flow. It's pretty straightforward, but that's how it works. Now, there is one thing to note on this. Now, this is going to be a little bit different than you might have seen, and that is when we use tab bars, at least for me, I set them up by using enums. And we have 3 different tabs, so we have 3 different cases. Home, case, locations, case, more. We're not really going to rely too much on the enum right here. In more complex cases where you have to do certain things with the navigation of the tab bars at the bottom right here, you can use this enum to properly get the view index to handle whatever you need to. This is just how I set it up, but you will need to identify each one of these tabs with an integer. So we have these 3 functions right here and this one that's not working. So what we need to do is we need to stub out a HomeCoordinator, which we can create fully, and then stub out the locations and MoreCoordinators. So, and then what we'll do is within this show tab bar, we are going to create the TabBar view controller that will handle these tabs right here. So let's go back in and let's go back into our coordinators. And then to be clear, let's create a new group called tab flows. And let's organize these by name again. And then we're going to do new file, HomeCoordinator. And then inside this HomeCoordinator, we are going to create, the HomeCoordinator. Class HomeCoordinator. You'll notice that the presenter types are always going to be the same for this project. Again, like I mentioned in the first video, we made this generic so you can actually have a presenter be a UIViewController of any type. We're going to have a start. We're going to override the start method. And then for this one, it's going to be fairly small, this coordinator. It only does one thing. It shows that one home view. If you're wondering why I don't just put all this code right in the start method, you could. I just like being consistent with the way I code, so I actually make one function for each view controller configuration. We're going to need SwiftUI for the... We need to import SwiftUI in order to use the default or the native UI hosted controller. And then our autocomplete should start working again right there. And this is where we actually set the title. So like I mentioned earlier with this home view, if you go into it, this navigation back bar hidden is going to hide the SwiftUI version, and this will take precedence over that. Okay, so presenter.set view controllers, controller animated true. Okay, so this will coincide with the auth coordinator. So the auth coordinator, what you'll notice is at the very top when it shows the login screen, we are setting the view controller, the entire view controller stack with one controller. Inside the MainCoordinator, we will be doing the same thing. The HomeCoordinator doesn't technically need this animation right here because it's embedded within the MainCoordinator. The MainCoordinator is the one that will look like it's being animated. So in this case, with the HomeCoordinator, we can technically make this false, but it's kind of a moot point because you won't actually see this anyway. So we can leave it as true. I tend to leave this animated as true. So in the future, if there's any more screens that we are managing with this HomeCoordinator, they'll just have this nice little animation to them. But just know that if this is false, then obviously it's just going to flash on screen rather than have a nice animation to it. Cool. So now in the start, we just say show home screen. Next, we need our LocationsCoordinator. In this case, what we can do is we don't really need to copy and paste, but what I will do is copy and paste this part inside our new right here, like this, paste. LocationsCoordinator start, we don't have that, so we can just get rid of that. For this, we don't really have a screen in any of these, and we don't technically need one right now. But what we'll do is we will stub out the location screen just with some text, just so we can see it for the moment. So we're going to say new group, locations. We're going to create a new file, SwiftUI file, call LocationsView, and we'll rename this to just locations. And to be consistent, what we have to do again and is say navigation, I can't type today, navigation backbar hidden, so we don't have two of those navigation titles. We'll do the same thing for the more screen, although we will be creating more of the home screen or more screen in this video. So we're going to do a new group, call it more, and then create a new file, MoreView. Same thing here. Say more and navigation backbar hidden. So now what we can do is go up here and say new from template, MoreCoordinator. Organize these by name. Come to the locations, start, and then just like in our other coordinators, we're going to do mark showing screens. Again, you can organize it however you want. Like say private AccountHostingCoordinator. Real quick, I know I haven't explained this yet, but you'll notice that whenever I sometimes have private here, what I'm trying to do when you work on a large team, you should use private as much as possible because it hides what shouldn't be accessible outside of this class. Sometimes it's for security. Most times on a team, it's so you don't expose functions that will then be auto-suggested using code complete that the other team might get confused about. So you don't want to accidentally hit an auto-completion that references a function that you don't want to be accessible outside of the class. Now, when it comes to actually going in and adopting these protocol methods, whenever you adhere to a protocol, you can't have it as private. So that's why you see the difference between sometimes I'll use private, like this should actually be private because we are accessing these showing methods only from within this class. Okay, so LocationsCoordinator show, we've got func show locations screen. Let view equal locations view. Let controller equals UI hosting controller. Root view controller.title equals locations. This is actually going to be one of those, one of the screens that we're going to be using our hosted controller rather than the native UI hosted controller in the next coming video. Then we're going to say presenter.set view controllers, and the only controller in this navigation stack at this point should be the location screen. Same thing with the MoreCoordinator. You could probably just copy this whole thing and paste it over. Show more screen. Show more screen. And then we're going to say more view. And then it should be good. Show more screen, show more screen. And this extension should be MoreCoordinator. Okay, so now that we have all of our coordinators for the main flow, again, what we just did was we stubbed out each one of these coordinators, which is represented by these little blue boxes here. And we will then set them up in a TabBar navigation. So if we go back to our MainCoordinator, what we can do now is return the coordinators for each one of these things. This is actually locations coordinator. Okay, so when we configure these, here's how we're going to do it. We're going to say let flow presenter equals UI navigation controller flow presenter dot tab bar item equals UI tab bar item title home. Control M will wrap all of these parameters into new lines. UI image, system name, house. And then we're going to use that enum we talked about before, dot raw value. Let me finish this out. There's just a few more lines of code, then I'll explain what's going on here. Okay, this is going to be the same for these other two as well. What's happening here is we are setting up the HomeCoordinator to be a sub-coordinator of the MainCoordinator. I know that's kind of a mouthful, but basically the main flow owns these subflows. And what we're doing is we're setting it up to be child coordinators of this MainCoordinator coordinator. So how we do that is we are giving it its own presenter. This object is going to be what is used to show all screens within this coordinator. Now, if there are sub-coordinators, again, within this coordinator, they might have their own presenter as well. But that depends on the context and what you're trying to do. Things can get pretty advanced pretty quick. We will show, this is a great example of how sub-coordinators are used. So we are creating its own presenter. The presenter we are setting as a tab bar item. This right here is what gives us our little image at the bottom of the screen for home right here. This is a system image. You can check this out using the SF Symbols app. And the tag is just used to reference it in the future. So if we go back into it real quick, we have this little home, and it's going to be the same thing for these two as well. This is what actually shows it in that tab bar interface. That will be defined up here after we finish these two other methods. So then what we do is we actually create the coordinator, we pass in the presenter, and then we hit start right here. Once we create the delegate, we'll also set the delegate method right there, or we'll set the delegate of this HomeCoordinator to this MainCoordinator instance that we're in. Then Again, another important thing, we have to store it as a sub-coordinator within the MainCoordinator. So this main flow right here, which is represented by the MainCoordinator, will then store each one of these blue boxes, each one of these coordinator flows inside of itself, so it is maintained in memory. So it's not deallocated. All right, so let's go back in here, and then we return the coordinator. And I'll show you here why in a minute. So what we can do is we can actually copy this, paste it down here. This is going to change to Lokes. So this title again is going to be at the very bottom of this. So I'm abbreviating locations just so it's not too long. This is going to be mapping and lips. And then we're going to say this is LocationsCoordinator, and then it's going to return that. So we can paste this again for the MoreCoordinator, call this More. The image name is line.3.horizontal. And now we need to change this to More, so it uses the correct reference for the tag. Generally speaking, in UIKit, all views do have tags. It's kind of a deprecated way of doing it. It's kind of an anti-pattern to use a tag. Some situations require it. We don't really need it right here, I suppose, but it is good practice for the tabs to actually have a tag reference on them. But generally speaking, if you're working in strictly programmatic UIKit, you don't want to add a tag to those views within a view controller, unless there's a very specific use case for it. Again, it's only a best practice until you have to break it. And there are situations you have to break best practices. Let's see, HomeCoordinator, we'll say More. And that should fix that. Okay, so earlier I added this home nav delegate. This actually isn't going to be here. But what we will be doing is we are going to have a MainCoordinator. We will have a MoreCoordinator delegate in here, and that is going to allow us to log out here in the future. Won't go over that quite yet because we still have to map out some of these other screens. Okay, we created these coordinators, and just for a little bit more room, what I'll do is I'll close the sidebar and I'll minimize a couple things here. Now we have to actually create the tab bar. So to do this, we are going to configure and create these coordinators by calling those methods we just created. Configure HomeCoordinator. Configure MoreCoordinator. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say let controllers equal. So when you're creating a tab bar, you have to say what controllers are to be showed at the root level of each tab. To do that, we are going to use the presenter for each one of these coordinators. Because each coordinator has a presenter, which is technically a UIViewController, we can use them as the root level view controllers for each of the tabs. So we can say HomeCoordinator.presenter. Think of this as an equivalent of just saying like HomeViewController. It's the exact same type of thing. But the nice thing is, since this is the presenter, whenever the navigation within that tab changes, because the presenter is the one at the root level, it's going to reflect the current state of the navigation stack for that tab. So for instance, if I go into my view here, think of this blue box as the presenter. When it presents the locations, it's going to be at the top of the navigation stack. When we then push the upgrade screen, that's going to be the top of the navigation stack. And then when we have eventually the subflow being the account flow within this, it's going to show this presenter as the top layer of this navigation stack. So each one of these coordinators has a presenter at the root level. Now, if there's only ever going to be one screen on this coordinator, we could technically say that that screen is going to be the root level without having all of these this main sub-coordinator be associated with this tab. But again, that just depends on the use case. If you want to get as crafty as you can get as crafty as you want, but the main point is that the list of controllers represents the root of each tab. And then we've got MoreCoordinator.presenter. TabBar controller. Then we say TabBar controller.set view controllers. Okay, now what I said before about each one of these presenters, where's my HomeCoordinator here? Having this little animated right here when we set the view controllers, it's not going to be shown, and the reason for that is this happens too fast. We might get a little bit of an animation, you might see it, but it's generally not going to be shown. We are setting all of the view controllers for the tab bar with this method, and then we're saying animated is false because we want them to be on screen as soon as possible. The transition from the auth flow to the main flow will happen in around 0.3 seconds is the default. So we want the content of the main flow to appear as soon as possible so that transition doesn't look a little odd. And then after that, we just say presenter.set view controllers tab bar controller animated true. Okay, and then let's remove this. So a little bit about this. Technically speaking, this is a tab bar controller embedded within a UI navigation controller. We could technically reset the presenter to be the tab bar controller, but we want the root presenter for the MainCoordinator to still be a navigation controller. So when the user logs out, we can cleanly reset the navigation stack. Remember, the presenter of the main flow is actually contained within the application coordinator, the root level coordinator, the application coordinator. And that will change the navigation stack to incorporate the main flow and then the auth flow. It just so happens that we have a main tab bar interface embedded within the presenter for the entire app. So it might seem a little weird, but just know that the reason we are setting this tab bar controller from the root level presenter is just so we can reuse this presenter to then change the entire app's navigation stack. So from that point on, we should be good to go. As long as the build gods are in our favor here, we should be able to run this and navigate into the main area of the app and navigate through a couple tabs. So let me close this out, rerun it, and it should pop right open. So again, we still have our registration flow right here that we can go back and forth into. If I hit submit, it should lead us right into the test view because I haven't changed that yet. So let's go in and change that. ApplicationCoordinator. Again, Command-Shift-O brings up this search, file search, ApplicationCoordinator. Now, this is what we need to get rid of right there. So let's get rid of that. So start main is no longer going to be that. We're going to say let MainCoordinator equal MainCoordinator presenter. Again, what we just went over is that the root level presenter is the presenter for the two coordinators we have here, auth and main. Auth MainCoordinator dot delegate equals self. We don't quite have this yet, so let's go in and actually make this. We do have this, we just have it. Extension MainCoordinator. Right there, that's what we need. On MainCoordinator, and we can just say start auth self.free coordinator. And then what I haven't done yet is we need to mark these still. Right there. So this will be fine then. And then all we have to do, oh, where am I here? Coordinator.start. And then of course we have to store this in memory. So we say self.store coordinator MainCoordinator. Now what we'll do is the app starts the auth flow up. And then in the auth flow, when delegation completes, it's going to start the main. And then we don't have this part hooked up within the MainCoordinator, but eventually once we actually set the button up within the account screen, they'll be able to log out. This will get hit and it will start the auth back up. Right now, we're not maintaining any kind of auth state or logged in state. We'll handle that in the next video, but just know that right now it's going to switch between the two. Okay, so now that that's in, we should be able to run the app again and then see the login screen. When we hit submit, here we go, here's our tabs. So right now we're just switching between different pieces of text, home, locations, and more, but we've got everything set up with our main navigation now. So moving forward, let's not stop, let's just keep going. What we're going to do now is we're going to create an account screen. The account screen is going to, let me switch over to my, so this is the finished product. The account screen is going to include these views right here. With an edit account, we won't do the edit account right now. All we're looking for is just to have this logout button. That's it. We will add a couple of these views in here just for the sake of completeness of this, but we just want the logout button to complete the cycle of being able to log in and log out with this. So some of you in the comments section and some of these other videos, you have requested how do you handle auth state and give users access to certain things. In this particular use case, what we're doing is we're considering once you're in the main area of the app, you're logged in. There is no guest account. Guest accounts are a little bit more tricky. If that's a video that you would like to see in the future, let me know in the comments below. But guest accounts would require us to actually be able to enter the home screen. And then when we tap on this account button, if the user is not authenticated, it would pop up the auth screen rather than us landing on it when we first open the app. So the auth flow would then be presented in different locations of the app as almost like it's an account barrier that you need to create. But guest accounts can be tricky depending on what your use case is. But in any case, let's go back into the app. We need to now, just because I'm a little OCD when it comes to these organizations here, let's come in here. We can now delete our test view, move to trash, and I will reorganize these by name. And we're going to create a new group, and it's going to be called account screens. We will have more than one account screens in here. We do have an edit account screen that we're going to create in the next video, but for right now we're just going to have this account, and then we're going to say new file from template. It's going to be a SwiftUI view called account view. Now this one will have, this is going to be our first view that has a custom hosting controller as well. And we'll get into that here in a few minutes, but for the most part, let's just fill out this account view right now. Let's make some more space. Okay. So again, what we're going to do is our target is this right here. And I'll show you how to do that. VStack. We're going to have a scroll view. Okay, so this scroll view, what it does is it allows this top area to scroll. Eventually, depending on the type of app you're making, you might have quite a bit in this account area, maybe some images, maybe some other editable things in here. You don't want to cover some buttons. You can add these buttons into the scroll view, but we're just leaving those for right now. And they will not be a part of the scroll view for this view. Z stack. This Z stack is going to be the actual avatar image. So we're going to have a circle underneath and then the avatar image on top of it. Foreground style. And this is going to be, just use some system defaults here. Person.fill, resizable, aspect ratio is going to be fit, and then we're going to say frame is going to be width 70, height also 70. Now, what for SwiftUI screens that can be kind of complex or share a lot of the same values when it comes to these CG floats, I tend to lean on having something like this private enum called constants. And that'll do things like static let avatar background size CG float equals 70. I mentioned this in one of my other videos, but the reason I use an enum here is because an enum cannot be instantiated. A struct in class can, an enum cannot. So using an enum is just kind of like a safeguard for other developers to realize, like, hey, you shouldn't actually do something like constants like that. It's not used for that. That's the only reason. You can use a struct. There's nothing holding you back from using a struct. This is just a programming style pattern that I use personally. Also note that when you do use this constants, I have noticed that the simulator acts a little bit slower when you use constants and put it in here. If you use raw values for like width and height, the SwiftUI preview seems to calculate that faster on build times versus using a constant. So it's hit or miss depending on what your use case is and depending on what you actually want. But just know that it does tend to work faster from my experience if you use raw numbers down here rather than these constants. You just lose a little bit of the organization that I mentioned. Background size. So we got image. And Control M for man. I'm gonna wrap this constants dot avatar background size, and then the Z stack itself. We're gonna say the frame, the width is gonna be constants dot avatar background size. Actually, this needs to be avatar size. Sorry, avatar size, avatar size, avatar background size. Width, height, constants, avatar background size. And again, Control M to wrap those down to help organize this a little bit. From that point on, what we can do is we can show this. So I'll build this. Hopefully it takes only 2 seconds. And then I'll refresh the previews. And there's our little avatar right there. Cool. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this so we can hide some of that. And then we can start working on some of this text that we have. So we're going to say text for the name of the account, which we're going to say John Smith. Top 20. And then we're going to have a spacer. And if you didn't know, we can actually set the height of a spacer. so it doesn't push everything all over the place. Setting a height of a spacer just pushes it by 20 points. From that point on, what we're going to have is we are going to create this view right here. It's kind of like a labeled, it's a label. Well, I guess it's just a label. Sometimes I get confused sometimes because I also use this type of view for tapping on it to edit things. But in this case, we're just using it as a label. Okay, so what we're going to do is we are going to start mocking this up. But instead of mocking it up here, what I usually do is I'll usually just mock the raw value up right here, and then I will cut that out and then put it into its own SwiftUI view object. But we'll skip that and we'll go right to actually making this into its own SwiftUI object itself. And it's just going to be a list row. We're going to use this for the more screen as well. So we're going to say new file from template, SwiftUI view, list row. And let's minimize this up here. And each list row is going to have a title and the trailing text on it. So we're going to say var title string, var trailing text. It's going to be optional. Not always going to have it. The more screen's not going to have it, for instance. vstack, hstack. So this vstack is just saying that this top, including the email and this email text right here, that's the hstack. The vstack includes this box containing both of these items and then another divider view. Now we're going to use this again for these screens right here. So that's the goal here. So we're going to say text is going to be title. We're going to have a spacer to push the leading text and the trailing text apart from each other. And then we're going to say if there is some trailing text, so we're unwrapping it right here, then what we can do is we can just give it some text, verbatim, trailing text. Okay, if you've never seen this verbatim before, what this means is if the text in here is an actual email, so me@gmail.com, and I can't type. So if you do this, SwiftUI is actually what we can do, I can just show you. Title is going to be email, and then trailing text. So if I just add this trailing text, we're going to build real quick, succeed, and then refresh. So I guess it's not doing it. Let's try john@gmail.com here. Interesting. Okay. In any case, usually what happens is if you don't have that verbatim, SwiftUI will tend to find, if this is a link or a URL, it will style it as such in some use cases. So if this is an actual like HTTP URL, using the normal text with a URL inside, SwiftUI tends to style that using a link, making it blue. If you don't want that and you just want the raw text, you can use the verbatim, and SwiftUI will not do that. That's why we use verbatim when it comes to links, or if we have like a value in here. You can test that in your own time. Looks like emails are one of those use cases where it's not actually doing that. So cool. Okay, moving on. So now that we have the hstack in there, we need to also say if show trailing chevron. Okay, so when it comes to the more area, we need this little image right here on the right hand side. So what we're going to do is we're going to say we're going to have a Boolean value that says show trailing chevron, and we're going to say equals false for right now. We're also going to have an action. So if a user taps on these rows, if we set this up to have an action, then it can become a button as well. So right here, we're going to say show trailing chevron, and we want it on the right side of the text. So we will be able to have text and then the chevron on the right hand side. And this is just image system name chevron.right. And then the H stack is going to have some padding on the right hand side. Now if we come back out, zoom in maybe just a little bit here. Now we can see that we have an email and this on the right hand side. If we set the show chevron to true, we should be able to see the chevron pop up here in the right hand side right after it's done building, and we do. Cool. Okay, so now that that's done, let's turn this back to false. And then now we have that H stack. So let's minimize this. Now we want that line underneath it. So to do that, we're going to say rectangle foreground style. It's going to be gray.opacity 0.5. And it's big because we haven't set the frame on it yet. The frame's height is just going to be 1. Cool. We have our little view here. Just for the sake of styling, we're also going to say padding leadings 20, and then padding top 5. The padding top 5 is primarily going to be used in the list. So once it's stacked on top of each other, like this, there's going to be a little bit of padding here to help organize this a little bit. We won't go through too many of those nitpicky things though. Cool, so the list row is done. Just to reiterate, here's what it looks like. We've got the title, which shows up like this email right here. We've got trailing text, which shows up on the right-hand side. We can show a chevron to indicate to the user that they can tap on this to lead to another screen. And we have an action that we have yet to set up actually. So what we can do is right here underneath the V stack, what we'll do is we'll say on tap gesture and just say action. That's it. One thing I like to do though, right before the on tap gesture, is you want to set a clip shape or content shape. And we're just going to say rectangle. Oops. Okay, the reason we do this, if you don't set this content shape before you set the tap gesture, what you'll notice is anywhere there's not an actual physical pixel, like a non-transparent pixel, like an opaque pixel, the tap gesture won't work. But if you set the content shape forces the entire touch area to be the entire bounding box of the view itself. So we wanted to set the content shape so we don't have to tap on an actual opaque pixel on screen, and we don't frustrate the user. That's why we do this. So on tap gesture, cool. So that's all done. So now if we go back to our account view, we can come down here after the spacer and say list row. Title is going to be email. We're going to say trailing text is just going to be the placeholder John at example.com. And we're going to have the spacer between, this should actually be 100 right here, not 1,000, 100. Cool. Okay, so now we have that. We've got a couple buttons to put on screen. But before that, let's see here, we're going to add a little bit of spacing between the scroll view or the V stack here. Padding top 20. We're going to push down the top of this a little bit. There we go. Okay, so scroll view's done with all the content right there. We're going to minimize this, and then we're going to create our buttons. And let's zoom out so we can see this a little bit more easily. This is currently not going to do anything right now. We're going to say padding top And we'll space the buttons out by about 10. Cool. So there's the buttons. Let's zoom in just a little bit here. Scroll down. Cool. So there's the account screen. We are all set with that. So now what we need to do is we need to create the view model for this. So we actually have actions. Let's go back in here and create a new file from template. And this is going to be our account view model. And just like before, I'm just going to import SwiftUI, import UIKit, import combine. Actually, for this one, we probably don't even need combine or any of this stuff. In any case, extension account view. We're going to say class. Just like all the other ones, we're going to have view model. It's going to subclass base view model, observable object. And we are going to have a navigation delegate. Any object on account back tapped func on account exit tapped on account logout tapped. There will be another one, but we won't. Which is on account edit tapped. Okay, so this one we're not going to implement right now, but now that we're in here, we can say weak var nav delegate account nav delegate, and then var show exit button equals false. This is going to play a part in the next video. We won't go over this right now, but basically just know that because certain views will be reused, so this account flow is used in the locations flow and in the more flow. However, in the more flow, we're pushing it onto a navigation stack. In the locations flow, we're actually going to be presenting it as a modal. So there's two different presentation contexts when it comes to this view. And because of that, we need a method, a mechanism to actually state whether or not it shows an exit button. So that's what this is going to be. We're not going to do that right now, though, or handle that. Okay, so now we come down here just like in our other screens, and we're going to say mark actions to organize this a little bit better. Account view. And we're going to say func on back tapped, just nav delegate. Nope. Oh. Dot view model. Nav delegate dot on account back tapped. And this is just, we're just going to go down the list and create these things. So you can either fast forward or you can stay with me. Cool. So now that we have all that in place, we got to go back into the account view and add it to the view itself. Let's hide that. And we need to add it to the signature down here. Okay. Now, you might be wondering to yourself, we just added this exit option here. Where is that going to be? Because if we look at the account view right now, in our preview window, there's no exit button. There's no really real way to handle this. This is going to happen. This is going to be the exit button is going to be created from the UIKit side, the hosting controller side. Because the hosting controller actually manages the navigation bar, we are going to handle that from that side, which also reminds me that one thing we didn't do here is hide the navigation button, or have the navigation bar back button hidden. Cool. So from the hosting controller side, and we'll do this here in a second, and you'll see where it actually is. That's where the exit button will be, and it's going to be shown conditionally based off of this property right here that we had. Cool. So the account view is almost done. We just need to call the view model.edit on edit tabbed, and then view model on logout tabbed. Now for the hosting controller. So unlike the other views we've had so far, we are going to create a custom hosting controller to handle the navigation bar and its own title. So a new file from template, account hosting controller. And this is going to, let me minimize this. So we're going to have UIKit. Okay, so for this one, we're going to say class account hosting controller. This is our custom hosting controller that we made a little earlier in the previous video, actually. Account view is going to be the view. Account view.view model. And for this, I don't add anything to the root level. What I do is I just say mark. I start all my UIViewControllers the same way. Extension, hosting controller, view did load, super.view did load, and we are going to have a okay. With programmatic UIKit, this is how I set up each view controller personally. I'll have a lifecycle extension for view did load, view will load, view will disappear, those kind of things. And then I'll have an area here to actually create the view programmatically. So this would include any subviews. Because this is a hosted controller that is wrapping a SwiftUI view, this is much more simplistic. So we set the title here rather than inside the coordinator. And then what we're going to do is we're going to say if view model.show exit button, else we're going to show exit button. We'll set this up in another video. I'm not going to do this right now. And then we're also going to say set custom set back button. For right now, we're just going to utilize the default push, the default back button that comes courtesy of the UI navigation bar, but we'll fill these out here in the next video. Actually, we do need to set these because we have a custom action. Okay, so basically what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set this back button so it will call the account view models on back tap. You can, like I just mentioned before, typing this, you can just utilize the default UI navigation controller's back button, but generally speaking, I don't do that. Your mileage may vary. So what we're going to do is we're actually going to create a couple UIViewController extensions to handle this. Because we're going to be using both of these methods for multiple screens, we're going to create an extension to handle this for us so we don't have to hard code this each time. So we're going to create a new group called extensions. And I'm going to organize this by name again. I should probably add these to it. And within extensions, new file from template, UIViewControllerExtensions. We have to import UIKit. UIViewController. We're going to have two methods on this. One's going to be called setCustomBackButton, the target, and selector. Now, if you're coming from a SwiftUI background, you're not probably going to know what these two things are. In UIKit, UIKit has a way of actually specifying what function it needs to call. So the target is going to be the object, the class, struct, or just object that holds onto that function. The selector is the actual function itself. And that's how UIKit actually gets a handle on this. So we're going to say navigation item dot hides back button equals true. Navigation item dot set hides back button true, animated false. This is just kind of a sanity check. Navigation bars in UIKit, just in general, really, are kind of like the bane of a developer's existence. So there are some times where this doesn't work. I've seen instances where this doesn't work. So just to solve for both, we add both. Generally speaking, you'll find instances where one will work and one won't. But just because I'm paranoid and OCD, I just add both of them. You probably don't need them right here, but I do because in the past I've had so much frustration with these things that I just add them both now. Let back image equal UI image system name chevron.left. And just because we just talked about this obviously hides the back button. This hides the default back button. What we're doing here is we're recreating it for our own use cases. Dot with tint color, rendering mode, we're going to say dot black, rendering mode, always original. If you don't know what the rendering mode is, it can be always original or always template. You use always original if you want the original color to always stay the same. You use always template if you want the tint color to be able to change dynamically. So say you're dynamically changing the theme of your app. Use always template in that situation. Since we don't care about that right now, we are going the easy route and just saying always original. Back button equals UI bar button item. Back image, the style is just going to be plain. The target is the target we pass in as a parameter, and the action is going to be the selector right there. And there we're going to say navigation item dot left bar button item equals back button. Now, as far as the navigation item and the bar button items, this is kind of outside of the scope of this tutorial, so I won't go over that. But just know that it does have each view controller has a reference to a potential navigation controller, and it always will have this navigation item associated with it. The second method we're going to have is set navigation exit button. Just like the other one, the last function we're going to say target any selector. And for this one, we're going to say let close icon equal UI image system name X mark. Again, if you don't have like SF symbols app on your machine, I highly recommend you download it. It has all the references to the system images that Xcode iOS includes in itself. With tint color, we're going to say dot black again, and always original for the rendering mode. Let close button equal UI bar button item. We're going to say close icon, style plain, target and action. Nope. Selector. Navigation item dot right bar button item equals close button. So these are just a couple of convenience methods in an extension for the UIViewController. So now let's exit out of this, go into the account view controller. So now we come back into here, and what we can do is set these. So we can say set navigation exit button. We don't currently have a function for this, so we need to create one. Mark actions extension account hosting controller, and we've got at Objective C func on back button tapped. Objective C func on exit button tapped. Okay, now again, if you're coming from the SwiftUI ecosystem, you probably haven't seen this Objective-C before. Because view controllers in the selector system runs off of the Objective-C runtime usually, we have to, well, it's exposed from Objective-C, so we need to mark these as Objective-C functions, or else we can't use them as selectors. So the target is going to be self, because this object, self, includes the method that we're using as a action. We're going to say on back button tapped, and you do not include the parentheses or the parentheses in this. Cool. So then what we need to do is we need to say set custom back button. So if we're not showing the exit button in the top right hand corner of the screen, we are going to show the back button in the top left hand corner of the screen. The target is self, and the selector is on exit button tapped. So from here on out, remember, something's going on here. Yep. Sorry. The syntax for selector is actually hashtag selector on back button tapped without parentheses. Yep. Getting too ahead of myself here. On exit button tapped. That should go away. Perfect. Okay. So, or what was I saying here? Okay. So yeah. So what's cool is, because this hosting controller, and let me go into this hosting controller by holding Command, hovering over the name, and then left clicking. Again, we have a connection between the view model and the hosting controller with this view model.hostingController. And we have a reference to the view model from the hosting controller with this class property as well. So if I go back into the hosting controller, the nice thing is now we can just do view model.on back tapped, view model.on exit tapped. And this will delegate to the view model, which will then call the nav delegates method to handle navigation. Okay, that's done. So let's close some of the account stuff here. Close other tabs. Now what we need to do is we need to go back into the MoreCoordinator or MoreView, and we have to add this to as a list item. So this MoreView is going to change. We're now going to have a list in it. Scroll view. So if you need a visual on this, we finished the account screen. Now what we're doing is we're adding it here as a button, and then we're going to connect it to the navigation. So we have v stack. We're going to say the spacing is going to be 10 between these list item elements. And we are going to say list row title. Oops. Actually, these might be a little bit different. We need to add an icon in front of these things, which we don't have right now. So let's actually go back into list row. And what we're going to do is we are going to give this an optional image name. And I should specify this as system image name. And then at the very beginning of the H stack, we're going to say if let image name, image system name, image name. And we're just going to say the frame of this the width of it is going to be 20. We don't really care about aspect ratio right now with this. So then in our example, what I can do is we will reuse that avatar image. What was the name of that? If I can't recall, let's go into the account view real quick. Person fill. List row, MoreView. Actually, title trailing, system image name, and we'll use this as an example. Person fill. Okay, so with that done, we should have now added to our list row here, and it failed. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna rebuild the project, and image name, system image name, rebuild. Succeeded. Let's view the preview. Cool, we have a little image on the left-hand side now. So now let's go back into our MoreView and then add this. So we're going to say list row. The title is going to be account. There isn't going to be any trailing text here. So what we can do is we can skip that and say system image name. This one, however, is going to be person crop circle. And then the action is at the very end, so we can just have a couple curly brackets here, and that should be it. For that, we should have a little indicator. Yep. So we now have our account button. So the more view, we currently don't have a view model for to handle actions. So let's create one. And in this, we are going to have our nav delegate for this is going to be protocol MoreView nav delegate. Again, from any, it's going to inherit from any object. Not inherit, but it's going to adopt any object. Or it should be of any object type, sorry. Func on MoreView account tapped. View locations tapped. Cool. Now let's create the view model. And this is pretty much it. We just have actions in this view model. All right, now I'm just going to declare the actions. We're not going to have that one right now, so we are not going to complete it. On upgrade. I'm just filling some of these out for the future because we will have a locations button and an upgrade button. Delegate on locations tapped. On upgrade tapped. Again, these won't do anything right now because we don't have these set up. Let's see, view model on MoreView. There's no initializers. Oh, yeah. Should probably make this optional. There we go. Okay, so now that that's in place, what we're going to do is we won't need an actual hosting controller for this one. We could just use the default one. Okay, so we have everything all set up. Now we need to go into the MoreView real quick, and then we have to add the action to this part. So we could say view model dot on account. Oh, we should probably actually add the view model here. And complete the signature of the initializer down here. .init. Now what we can do is we can say view model .on account tapped. Cool. So okay, so now that that's done, let's go back into the MoreCoordinator, and instead of showing this view right here, well, we can still show the view, but we need to add the view model. View model. And then we need to adhere to the more nav delegate. MoreView nav delegate. So then we can say view model.nav delegate equals self. And then the MoreView now has the view model parameter. And we need to change this UI hosting controller to our custom hosting controller that includes both. And I need to add, let's see here, hosting controller, where's my autocomplete? There it is. View model. And now we need to complete this. And say on account tapped, on locations tapped, on upgrade tapped. Now we won't fill these two out quite yet because we don't need them. But here, what we're going to do is on view account tapped, we are going to show the account screen. Now there is going to be an entire account flow. We will handle that in the next video. So this account flow right here includes a couple other screens. So this will eventually be its own coordinator, but for the sake of time for this one, we're actually just going to create this code from within the MoreCoordinator at the moment, but this will move in the next video. And because we are using the account screen here, we also need to add its navigation delegate, or adopt its navigation delegate protocol. Delegate. Actually, one thing we could do is go into the account view model. Sometimes I like to do this just to be a little cheeky. Paste them all. If I hold down the option button and then click and hold, I can have multiple cursors here. Space, come down one. Just kind of a neat little trick. Just so I don't have to type all of it. That should go away. All right, so we want account back tapped. It's going to be presenter.popViewController, and it made it true. So when the user actually is in the account screen and they hit the back button, we're going to pop it back in this case. We're not going to use the account exit tap right now. That's going to be in the future video. We're not going to use this, but we are going to use this account logout tapped. Now, when it comes to this, we need a way of actually delegating up to the parent that we hit the logout button. This is going to change once we actually have the account flow set, but for right now, we're actually going to say, come on, Rob, protocol, more delegate. And this is going to our delegate, more delegate. Okay, so when the user taps the logout button, we need to then propagate that action up to the application coordinator. The application coordinator will then switch the main flows. So we start that out by right here. We could also technically use the notification center for this. I have come up with issues using the notification center with race conditions. So err on the side of caution if you do use the notification center to propagate the logout action. Okay, so in logout tap, we're going to say delegate dot this, and this is kind of like the on more coordination complete, but this is just a logout action. Cool. So we've got that. Now we got to come up and finish this show account screen. Model. Actually, this one had, I think this one, yeah. We had our own hosting controller for this one. There it is. Okay, so we've created it. And then once this is, let's see, we make sure we set everything here. We don't have to set the title because we set the title within the HostingController object. Okay, so we've pushed it on screen. When the user hits the back button, we are popping it off screen. And then obviously we've got this delegate method calling upwards for the logout tapped. Now what we need to do is we need to go up to its parent coordinator, the main coordinator. And then right here, we have to abide by the more delegate on more logout tapped. And then for this main coordinator, we already have a delegate within it. Oh, let me expand the right here. So what we do is we then just propagate it back up, and we say self.free coordinator. But before that, we'll say delegate dot on main coordination complete. Then this will in turn go up to the application coordinator. It will call this method, which will then start the auth and free up the memory used by the main coordinator. So just from a visual perspective, what we've done is inside the more flow, we've had this account screen here. This will become a flow in the future video. Account screen, the account screen is then logging out. It's telling this coordinator, hey, we just logged out. Then this is propagating up to the main flow and saying, hey, just to let you know we've logged out. And then it's moving up to the root level application coordinator and saying, hey, we've logged out using the logout action, start the auth flow. Again, you can skip this by using the notification center notifications, but again, I've had issues with that in the past. It is very useful if used correctly, but I'm not going to show that in this video. So if all that's said and done, let's go back into the MoreCoordinator and just make sure I have everything in here, and I don't. So MoreView nav delegate, we have to show the account screen. Account screen right there, and that should be it. We should be good. Let's go back into the main coordinator. And then we need to set, where's my more here? Coordinator dot delegate equals self. So we just set the more coordinators delegate to the main or the more coordinators delegate to the main coordinator right here. And don't worry, after the video is posted, I will go back and give everyone access to the GitHub repository on this, because this is kind of complex. There's a lot of little tiny moving parts on this, but once you see the code base, you'll actually understand this quite a bit more. If the build gods are with us right now, this should build, and we should be able to run this. Okay, so we don't have any authenticated state, so it's just going to plop us right on the login screen. We're going to hit submit. We've got these 3 tabs at the bottom. Our more screen shows the account button now. If we tap on that, it's going to push the account screen up, and our back button actually hid because we are not calling. I actually forgot to call these setup views. So where we set up the custom back buttons and everything, I just didn't call it within the lifecycle method. So if you want to go back into the AccountHostingController, close other tabs, and go into the viewDidLoad method, we need to call the setup views function right here. Now if I rerun it, go into the home screen, go into the More tab, click on Account. Our custom back button shows. We can click on that, and something is not right here. Let's go into the On back button tab in the View model. This is being called correctly. So likely what's happening is it's not being called from the MainCoordinator or MoreCoordinator. Or more than likely we're not account, it's setting itself to self. Presenter.PopViewController. Okay, so one other issue that I added in here, and you guys probably caught this way before I did. I actually flipped these 2 signatures. So this needs to come down here. This should be on back button tapped, and this should be on exit button tapped. Within the AccountHostingController's setup views, we just had to switch the methods because it wasn't actually calling this function. Now, if we run the app, we should be able to hit that back button. Submit, more, account, back button. Cool, works now. See, this is actually also kind of one of the benefits. Since all the navigation logic resides within these coordinators, there is generally only one path for the navigation to happen, so debugging is fairly straightforward. Cool, so move that away. Now if we hit log out, we go back to the login screen. Perfect. One other thing I want to mention. If I go into submit, you'll notice that if I hit this account button, the tab bar stays at the bottom right here. We can remove that, and it's actually fairly straightforward. So if we go back in the MoreCoordinator, the code that presents the account screen, because we're pushing it on the navigation stack, one thing we can do is inside the controller, so right here, we say controller.hides bottom bar when pushed equals true. That bottom bar is that tab bar that we just saw. So if I rerun the project, it'll launch, hit submit, more, account. Now we no longer have the tab bar at the bottom, so it looks very clean. So there you have it. We now are full circle. We have our start the auth flow, log in, log out of the main flow, and back. We have completed that cycle. So we can go submit, more, account, log out. Full circle. Okay, well, it's kind of another long one, but hopefully you all stayed with me. Like I said before, the entire series repository on this I will be posting on GitHub after I post all the videos for the series, and I'll be re-adding the link in the descriptions of each of the videos. So you'll have a better idea of how this is actually implemented, and you can use it for yourself. This is one of the more complex ones, but complex in the way from like a high level, but once you do it once or twice and see the code, it actually makes a lot of sense. Once you do it once, it'll be a good tool in your toolbox. So in any case, I hope that helped you out. In the next video, we will be creating the account flow, and then we will be adding and we'll be creating the locations view, and then we will be creating the upgrade, and then piecing everything together. It's probably going to be another long one, but it's going to be all said and done after that. And then by then you will be an expert in the UIKit Coordinator pattern, or hopefully you will be. But in any case, so yeah, in the next video, we'll be going over that. And until then, happy coding.